What's good? This is Ryu. So today we're going to be talking about the cosmology of Dragon Ball Heroes. We're also going to obviously have to touch on the cosmology of Dragon Ball Super and such as well, but the main focus is going to be Dragon Ball Heroes for this video. Originally, I had planned to do the cosmology in the Trunks vs. Silver video, however, it was already kind of Dragon Ball heavy even without the cosmology, so I decided that it would be best to do the Dragon Ball Heroes cosmology in its own separate video. So sit back, relax, and get ready to hear about the complexities of the Dragon Ball Heroes cosmology. First thing we have to establish is the structure of Universe 7, which Goku can destroy in the Battle of Gods arc, and is the baseline for much of the power scaling in the series. The fact is that Universe 7 is not a single space-time continuum. It's composed of multiple space-time continuums. This is outlined in guides such as Daisenshu that state the living world is split into two dimensions, the Demon Realm and the Universe. This indicates that both the Demon Realm and Universe as we know it are each their own separate dimension or space-time. By extension, this makes Otherworld a separate dimension from the living world as well. We see further evidence when Goku states that time runs differently in Otherworld, and that's why Super Saiyan 3 takes up so much energy in the living world. This demonstrates again a difference on how time functions and a separate space-time between Otherworld and the living world. We can also see such a discrepancy between the realm of spirit and time and the normal universe, where again, time explicitly flows differently and is considered a separate space-time. We also know that it is normally impossible to travel to the other world unless you die or can teleport there with something like instant transmission, further implying it to be a separate space-time. Beyond this, in the Dragon Ball Z anime, Elder Kai refers to the living world as the temporal realm, further backing up the notion that it is a separate space-time, different from the living world. In fact, although it's non-canon, in Dragon Ball GT, Seguro space is referred to as a space between dimensions, again confirming that the other world and living world are separate dimensions or spacetimes. Furthermore, we have statements from the Daisenshu guides that the living world's universe is the only one that runs with similar physics to our own. The other dimensions like Demon Realm and Otherworld seem to run more like magic and have a different set of physical laws than the living universe, further demonstrating that they are in fact separate and different space-time continuums. So at the end of the day, Universe 7 as a whole consists of at least a separate space-time for the living universe, Demon Realm, Otherworld, and Kaioshin Realm, as well as the Realm of Spirit and Time. Now that we have established that Universe 7 is actually made up of multiple space-time continuums, the question becomes, what is the size of these dimensions? The answer is infinite, aside from the Realm of Spirit and Time, which is explicitly the size of Earth. We can confirm this from Daisenshu 4, which states the universe is an infinite space filled with light and darkness, and that it stretches out into infinity. We can see this reiterated again when they say it is infinitely expanding as well in the same guide. Furthermore, the Daisenshu also states that the universe is an endless expansive space, and that the galaxies exist infinitely in the universe. Beyond this, the narrator in Dragon Ball GT even states that there are boundless galaxies in the universe. Finally, even Koyama confirms multiple times that the universe, hell, and Otherworld in general are all infinite in size. So it's very clear that the Dragon Ball living universe, as well as Otherworld, Kaioshin Realm, etc., are actually infinite in size. Now on to the higher dimensional structures in Dragon Ball. This one has evolved considerably in the last couple of years, and at this point, we have multiple pieces of convincing evidence to support that the Universe 7 structure is not simply a set of several universal spacetime continuums. It is in fact a higher dimensional structure. Our first piece of evidence comes straight out of Daisenshu, where it's stated that Otherworld is a supernatural world that transcends dimensions, which cannot even be perceived from the human world. Furthermore, the anime itself calls the living universe a lower realm, as well as the temporal realm, showing that the anime directly treats Otherworld and Kaioshin Realm as higher layers of reality beyond standard space-time. Beyond this, we have seen direct quotes from Takeo Koyama, a screenwriter for the Dragon Ball Z anime and the creator of the stories for the original 13 movies of Dragon Ball Z, that not only is the universe infinite in size, but a higher dimensional structure that transcends space and time. He goes further into depth, stating that while the living universe like we know it only contains 3 spatial dimensions, hell is a 4th dimensional structure, with the remainder of Otherworld being a 5th and 6th plane. This places Universe 7 in its entirety firmly as at least a 6th dimensional structure. If you accept Word of God statements, then this is an objective fact and very specific numbers were given, which is substantiated by Daisenshu itself, claiming Otherworld to be a higher dimensional structure, and the anime which again states the Otherworld is a higher realm above the temporal realm. This, however, is only the tip of the iceberg. If we look into the context of Koyama's quotes, he refers to the standard living universe as being 3-dimensional, with hell transcending space and time as a 4-dimensional structure. This means he is logically referring to spatial dimensions only in his statements. As you probably know, in most power scaling communities, we not only consider the spatial dimensions, but the temporal dimensions as well. So by adding the one standard temporal dimension to his stated spatial dimensions, we get our standard 4-dimensional universal space-time continuum. Hell would be 4 spatial dimensions like he states, and 1 temporal dimension for a 5-dimensional structure, and the totality of Otherworld would most likely continue in this trend and be 6 spatial with 1 temporal dimension for a 7-dimensional structure. So while a lowball for Universe 7's size is at least 6-dimensional, it is in actuality most likely 7-dimensional when looking at Koyama's statement in context to power scaling standards, of including both spatial and temporal dimensions in the analysis. Beyond the 7-dimensional structure of Universe 7, we actually can find even higher dimensional structures and layers of reality. First, we see this in the form of the neutral space. This is a space which holds the 12 universes, and presumably Zeno's realm as well. This is a big deal because it contains multiple infinite-sized, 7-dimensional macrocosms, acting as a higher dimensional axis for them. This would likely place the neutral space as an 8-dimensional structure. Beyond the neutral space, we actually have the temporal structure of the timeline itself, which houses and controls the flow of time for all infinite-sized universes and space-times inside of it, acting as a higher temporal dimension, or in other words, a second and higher time dimension. This would likely be considered a 9th-dimensional structure. Worth noting is that Zeno's palace does look like it also contains universes in bubble shapes. However, this is never confirmed directly or explored further, so we'll omit Zeno's temple, since as a structure its true nature is left vague. We also have the world of Void, which is located in the timeline according to Heroes. It resembles neutral space, but its placement in the timeline is not further specified. Finally, beyond the timeline, we have the white space between timelines, which holds all the timelines in Dragon Ball Super. We see this as the Z-Fighters use the time machine to go to alternate timelines. This structure contains many timelines, infinite in fact if we use the Dragon Ball video games. It acts as a higher dimensional axis and structure, and would be considered the 10th dimension in this case. Another interesting structure worth noting is the Dead Zone. It is portrayed as a pseudo-black hole in the anime, however its nature is expanded upon in the Daisenshu even further. The Daisenshu describes the Dead Zone as a superspace that sucks in everything, created by heightening one's energy. It is a space where not even a ray of light can penetrate, a space that freezes both body and soul. This tells us a few things. First off, a superspace is described as a space with more than 4 dimensions in modern physics, likely placing the Dead Zone as an at least 5th dimensional structure. It is also worth noting that the Dead Zone freezes even souls inside of it, showing its ability to affect not just physical matter, but souls as well. There's also a little noted structure called the Shinsenkai. It's located within Kami's Lookout, and clearly holds many stars within it, making it at least a multi-solar system-sized structure. Now, higher dimensional structures in Dragon Ball are all well and good, and most people have probably at least heard of these ones. However, there exist several structures that completely dwarf all the previous ones that a lot of people really don't know that much about. The next one is called the subspace. It is a place mentioned and expanded upon in the Daisenshu, Chozenshu, and other guides, and it's seen in Dragon Ball Z movies and Dragon Ball GT. We see the subspace while Goku uses instant transmission in the Broly and Cooler movies. We also see it when Capito Kai uses instantaneous movement or the Kai Kai technique to save Goku from Baby's revenge death ball. While very little time is spent in this realm, it's described in the Chosenshu as a subspace that doesn't belong to any of the worlds. In this subspace, there is no concept of time and space, and it's located between dimensions and cut off or separated from any other areas. It also says that Seguro space and the Room of Spirit and Time are located in this subspace as well. Furthermore, it is stated in the TV anime guide Son Goku Denetsu that instant transmission is passing through a different space that transcends time. So what does this mean? Well, the first fact is that this subspace not only has no space and time, but even specifies the very concepts of space and time don't exist in it. Furthermore, it explicitly transcends time, implying superiority to time as opposed to simply the absence of time. Finally, we know this subspace holds other dimensions, such as Seguro space and the Room of Spirit and Time, which are known to have spatial and temporal dimensions themselves. Using this, we can conclude that the subspace is dimensionless, yet it cannot simply be an inferior zero-dimensional structure, given it holds other dimensioned structures and is described as transcending time. This makes it superior to not only time and space, but their very concepts, which would include all levels of higher dimensionality, as they are just aspects of the concepts of space and time. This solidifies the subspace as what many people refer to as an outerversal or beyond-dimensional structure. Now there is one more structure that we need to discuss in Dragon Ball Super, and this is one not a lot of people know about. It doesn't have a formal name, but it is, for the sake of this video, going to be referred to as the blank page. This is the page that the manga panels and anime drawings are written on, and it underlies the entire cosmology and story, given it is exactly what they are written on. We actually see this in Dr. Slump multiple times. Now obviously I need to clarify that while Dr. Slump is its own series, it actually shares a cosmology and universe with Dragon Ball. We have seen crossovers in the Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Super anime with Dr. Slump, where Goku visits the main protagonist Arali's village in Dragon Ball, and she visits him in Dragon Ball Super where they actually spar. We also have Dragon Ball Z Goku appear in the Dr. Slump anime and manga as well. There are several crossovers with Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump in the Dr. Slump manga too. Not to mention, Arali is a playable character in Dragon Ball Heroes and other Dragon Ball video games, all of which share a cosmology. Anyway, getting back to the blank page, we see this mostly as part of Arali's gag powers. She at times leaves the manga panels or page to rewrite or alter the story. Oftentimes, Arali even interacts with Toribot, an Akira Toriyama author avatar who is seen writing the manga, anime, or story in general. This essentially puts the blank page above the Dragon Ball cosmology that it's written on, given the cosmology is simply fiction compared to the page. This would include the outerversal subspace, placing the blank page as one layer of reality above an outerversal structure. This concludes the relevant structures that exist in the Dragon Ball Super anime and manga. Next we'll get into the game-exclusive structures. The first thing we need to establish is that Dragon Ball Heroes has infinite timelines. This is confirmed mostly through scaling to Xenoverse, which does share the same cosmology. Not only are they similar lore-wise, but they've had crossovers where Trunks from Xenoverse, who is said to simply be from another dimension or timeline, is placed into Dragon Ball Heroes as a guest character, unquestionably connecting the cosmologies. It is stated in Xenoverse by Fu that history is not finite. It is also stated that history is infinitely branched by other patrollers. For those who want to claim that history is simply continuously branching and not actually infinite, the same Time Patroller said that the histories are too much to keep track of, showing those branches all currently exist if you can't keep track of them. Fu also states he wants to explore all the possible timelines, again confirming that all the timelines already exist to explore. So there are an infinite number of timelines in Xenoverse that exist, and by extension, the same in Heroes, since they share a cosmology. We also know the timelines are endlessly multiplying from every change, as confirmed by Trunks in the original Dragon Ball manga. This isn't the end of the amount of timelines in Xenoverse, however, because there are many multiverses in it. We have the main multiverse of infinite histories, but we also have a multiverse that is separate based on the Tokopedia timelines. as well as the parallel quests, each being their own set of separate histories, of which there are currently over 150 parallel quests, each of which being separate multiverses. It has been confirmed that the parallel quests contain the alternate universes and even other timelines, as you battle outside Universe 7 and even in alternate versions of Trunks' future in some of them in the same parallel quest. Furthermore, we even see an alternate timeline created by Fu, where Demigra is the supreme Kai of Time, and there exists another time vault, implying there may be many, if not an infinite number of separate time vaults. So we have many separate multiverses that contain infinite timelines, potentially an infinite number of multiverses. These are also endlessly growing and multiplying just like the original. Beyond the 10th dimensional axis which holds all the timelines, we have the Crack of Time, introduced in Dragon Ball Xenoverse and existing in several other games, such as Heroes. This structure is stated to exist outside and separate of the flow of time and history. This includes all the timelines and the normal multiverses. It's even stated to be outside the influence of the gods like the Kai of Time and the dragons such as Super Shenron. At the same time, it holds all histories and timelines, connecting them and acting like a higher dimensional axis, which is holding 10-dimensional constructs like we covered earlier, making it an 11-dimensional structure at the very least. And then we take another step up when looking at Beats World, which views the normal Dragon Ball multiverse, including the Crack of Time, as mere fiction and a game to be played. It is even stated that Demigra had to transcend space and time to reach such a world, and they talk about it being impossible for Dragon Ball characters to interact with Beats World normally. Some people like Screw Attack tried to argue that Beats World is simply a future point in a timeline, however that's just simply wrong and impossible based on the narrative. Beat literally creates an avatar to interact with the Dragon Ball Heroes game and its story. He does not normally have any such power in his world. Beats' world is simply depicted as treating the Dragon Ball Heroes world as a fictional card/video game to be played in almost all depictions. Even if his world used to be similar to the Dragon Ball Heroes world, and that was where the lore for the games came from, they are not the same world by any means. Beats' world acts as a higher layer of reality above all the previous Dragon Ball cosmology, even the Crack of Time and Subspace, which are just parts of the story in the game to him. This would place Beats' world as at least one layer above the blank page in the Dr. Slump and various Dragon Ball stories like Dragon Ball Super, which would make Beats' world at least 2 layers of reality higher than the outerversal subspace. Beyond Beats' world, we have the Charisma Mission world, where not only the standard Dragon Ball multiverse, but even Beats' world is treated as mere fiction in a video game. We explicitly see demon gods like Salsa playing a 3DS with Dragon Ball Heroes UMX, which includes Beats' world in it. The Charisma world is often confused with Beats' world, however it's different and stated to be intended to have a similar perspective as the reader for Dragon Ball Heroes games. We see the Charismas who play Dragon Ball games, as well as few inside of this world, and they're interacting with it. This would act as a higher layer of reality beyond Beats' world, and be 3 layers of reality above the outerversal subspace structure. Finally, we have the real world. This is in reference to the world where the authors actually live. It's implied to exist in Charisma Mission and other promotional material in Jump comics. It's mostly meta-statements and fourth wall breaking with author avatars talking about how they serialized in various Jump comics, or how Akira Toriyama is the supreme god of Super Dragon Ball Heroes, which includes Charisma Mission and the reason for their existence. You could argue the real world as being an even higher layer of reality still. One other thing worth mentioning is that if for whatever reason you don't agree with the subspace being an outerversal structure, then Beats' world, the Charisma world, and real world would all simply be higher layers of reality, or higher dimensional structures beyond the Crack of Time, which we established as at least 11th dimensional. It would also be above all the previously mentioned structures in the Dragon Ball multiverse. This would result in Beats' world being 12th dimensional, the Charisma world being 13th dimensional, and the real world being 14th dimensional. Although again, I think the outerversal arguments are much stronger than simply higher dimensional. That about wraps up the relevant structures in Dragon Ball Heroes for our scaling purposes. Sure, there are likely other space-times or smaller structures not touched upon, but we can't confidently call them higher dimensions or realities so we don't need to discuss them at this time, as they won't really impact the scaling of the cosmology. Now, with knowledge of the composition of the Dragon Ball multiverse, including heroes, we can get on to scaling all of our favorite Dragon Ball characters properly.